Tracy Sabol tonight on EWTN News Nightly, abortion in America. How the White House and pro-lifers reacted to the one-year anniversary of the overturning of Roe v. Wade. One for all. Why Republicans have introduced a measure regarding the American flag. We're on Capitol Hill. Be not afraid. Pope Francis reminds the faithful of the power from these three words. And listen to this. We speak with Father Mike Schmitz about his popular podcast. These stories and more tonight.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the feast of St. Jose Maria Escriva. Our top story tonight, it was a huge weekend for pro-lifers celebrating the one-year anniversary of the Supreme Court decision that overturned Roe v. Wade. At the same time, the Biden administration made it clear their push for abortion access is not fading away. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
Tracy, President Joe Biden held an event today discussing high-speed internet investments, but it was two major stories from this past weekend that are still making headlines on this Monday. One, that near mutiny in Russia, and the other, the battle to save babies.
Former U.S. Vice President Mike Pence spoke at the National Celebrate Life Day rally in Washington on Saturday.
We will support women in crisis pregnancies with resources and support for their care for the unborn and for the newborn as never before.
He emphasized to be pro-life means being pro-adoption. And when it comes to elections,
and we will work every day to elect leaders at every level who will stand without apology for the sanctity of human life.
And former President Donald Trump, in a speech before the Faith and Freedom Coalition's annual conference, took full credit for his role in the overturning of Roe.
But I'm proud to be the most pro-life president in American history.
For the White House, it was anything but a weekend of celebration. Vice President Kamala Harris, during a speech in Charlotte, North Carolina, reiterated her criticism of the Supreme Court.
How dare they attack our fundamental rights? How dare they attack our freedom?
Meanwhile, a failed revolt by mercenary soldiers in Russia. The short-lived uprising raises questions about President Vladimir Putin's grip on power. President Joe Biden spoke about it today before holding an event on internet investment.
We gave Putin no excuse to blame this on the West or to blame this on NATO. We made clear that we were not involved. We had nothing to do with it. This was part of a struggle within the Russian system.
Later, National Security Council spokesman John Kirby added,
the reason we would be concerned about instability in Russia is the war in Ukraine predominantly. Yes, Russia is a nuclear power, and yes, that's of concern, and yes, we continue to monitor that.
Also today, President Biden released a statement denouncing torture, writing in part, quote, "Today on the International Day in support of victims of torture, I reaffirm the United States' opposition to all forms of inhumane treatment and our commitment to eliminating torture." At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, at the recent White House Pride Month Festival, two American flags flanked a new so-called pride flag flying high above the South Lawn. The flag includes new colors to represent the transgender community, along with a triangle at the top. Some Republican lawmakers say the way the flag was displayed violated the flag code. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales reports. Eric?
Well, good evening, Tracy. You know, the event has prompted a new bill called the One Flag for All Act. It was introduced by Kansas Senator Roger Marshall. He tells me that the American flag is the only one that should be flown over and around federal buildings. He says that he was appalled when the American flag took second fiddle to the Progress Pride flag.
No American died or fought for the pride flag. American soldiers died to protect the flag and for what it stands for, liberty and justice for all.
Senator Roger Marshall says the U.S. flag code states the only exceptions include a POW MIA flag, a flag of a military branch, a flag of a visiting nation's diplomat, or a flag of a state or local government.
So it clearly spells that out, but we certainly don't think that the pride flag deserves a prominent location in place of Old Glory.
The White House defends its actions.
So the administration was proud again to display the pride flag. It was a historic event at the White House. It's centered around love and family.
Senator Tommy Tuberville calls it embarrassing. He says his father went ashore at Normandy in World War II and tells me flying the new controversial flag front and center wasn't right.
We have one flag. That's an American flag. And when we forget that, we're done. We're absolutely done. This identity politics is going to destroy the United States of America.
I think in any case of our flag, we all know what should be preeminent. And when you start putting flags up that are pushing a certain political point of view, regardless of what it is, whether it's left or right, that doesn't sound good to me.
Senator Ben Ray Lujan says Marshall's bill shouldn't pass.
I support the pride flag, and I think it's widely supported across the country, and a measure like that I do not believe will get support and pass either chamber or be considered.
The White House also said that the flag code was never broken because the flags in question weren't flown from staffs, and the 3 flag displays were actually below the main flag that flew above the White House. Tracy?
Eric, switching gears here, I know lawmakers are on vacation right now, but I know there's also been some developments regarding the Hunter Biden Department of Justice investigation. What can you tell us about that?
Well, there certainly has been some new developments. Speaker McCarthy actually tweeted out over the weekend that he plans to open up an impeachment inquiry into Attorney General Merrick Garland if if House Republicans don't get what they consider are satisfactory answers from the DOJ on the criminal investigation of Hunter Biden. Several whistleblowers have stated that several senior DOJ officials meddled with the U.S. Attorney David Weiss's investigation. So I'll stay on top of that issue. Tracy?
All right. Thank you so much. Correspondent Eric Rosales reporting from Capitol Hill tonight. Thank you again. We go now to Vince Colonnese, editorial director at the Daily Caller. Vince, great to have you back on. A lot to unpack here, but first, let's start with the Republican primary race. It's been a couple of weeks since former President Trump's indictment on federal charges, and a new NBC poll shows that 51% of Republican voters would choose him. That is up 5 points from April. Vince, what do you make of all of this?
This shows how little trust in our institutions Republican voters across the country have, because with each new indictment, with each new legal proceeding against Donald Trump, it only increases his standing in the polls. And my suspicion has been and continues to be that there are Democrat prosecutors around the country who are doing it for this very reason. They have it in their minds that advancing Donald Trump in the primary by bringing an indictment will help him win among Republicans who feel set upon, who feel besieged, and meanwhile they think it'll damage him enough that he doesn't prevail in a general election. If that's the motivating factor, and of course none of them will admit this outright, that is election meddling. So that's unfortunate. But as a key fact here, every time there is yet another assault on Donald Trump inside the legal system or outside of it, it only helps his standing in the Republican primary, and this is yet again proof of that.
Yeah, and as Owen mentioned earlier, this past weekend, of course, as we know, marked the 1-year anniversary of the overturning of Roe versus Wade. Vince, I'd like to get your reflections and also where you think the political, cultural, and legal landscape looks like going forward.
Yeah, this is a massive success for the pro-life movement, and it is deserving of celebration. 1 year this past weekend since the Dobbs decision overturning Roe versus Wade, many decades in the making, many activists out in the streets for many years, standing outside of abortion clinics, praying and trying to achieve this result. It finally came, and it came because of that very guy we talked about a moment ago, the former president of the United States, Donald Trump. He was able to appoint 3 Supreme Court justices to the court who are faithful to the Constitution and turned the decision of abortion over to the states, made it a democratic process rather than one that's decided by the court. Now, with that said, that's obviously not enough for pro-life people. They want to fight to save the lives of these babies. But in the end, it is something that was more democratic than what the court had created in the first place. And so now we're looking at 1 year since that decision. Over the weekend, you saw Donald Trump. He did give a speech at the Faith and Freedom Coalition to a very warm audience, very happy to have him. And he emphasized his role in getting the Supreme Court into this position. And now the issue of abortion is really going to be front and center as we head into the next major presidential election. The reason for that is because Democrats don't have much, if anything, to run on economically. They want to run on a cultural issue, and they think that abortion is going to deliver them votes. They think it helped them in the midterms to be able to run against the Dobbs decision. They think it's going to help them in the presidential election. The job now for conservatives, for Republicans, is to remind voters that the average Democrat in power is completely out of step with the average American when it comes to the issue of abortion. Most Americans support restrictions on abortion after the first trimester. That is not the position of the mainstream Democrat Party right now. They support abortion up until birth, and that is a very extremist position, and Republicans would do well to remind Americans of that.
Almost out of time, Vince, but I want to mention this on a more positive note. The National Assessment of Educational Progress released a fresh report last week showing the impact of COVID measures on learning. On average, public school students lost 10 points in math and 6 points in reading since before the pandemic. But this is the good part I was going to mention. Catholic schools, however, saw no meaningful decline. So how do you make sense of that stark contrast, and what does this say about Catholic education?
I think there are two factors for this. One is that the Catholic schools, by and large, stayed in school. The students, for those Catholic schools that did close around the country, it was typically just in that spring of 2020. By the fall, they were all reopened again. That is not the case with so many public schools in our country that stayed locked down and kept the kids out of the classroom. And that came at some massive detriment to so many children and set their education back meaningfully. Catholic school students, by and large, did not experience that. That's a good sign. One other piece here is the amount of time that's spent on actually educating children in the things that they need to know. Catholic schools are focused on the spiritual well-being, yes, and especially the academic well-being.
All right, real quick, Vince, before I let you go, what else are you following?
I'm following, in particular, this IRS whistleblower who is coming out with all of this information in the last week about Joe Biden and Hunter Biden and the extent to which the United States Department of Justice has been interfering into an investigation into their finances. It's very troubling when you hear an IRS supervisor come out and say that on a routine basis, the Justice Department was shutting down any questions whatsoever about who the, quote, big guy was that's alleged to be Joe Biden. They wanted to stop any questions into, quote, dad. That is, once again, Joe Biden. And there apparently was an effort to stop the U.S. Attorney for the District of Delaware, David Weiss, from prosecuting the Bidens in multiple districts around the country and from him becoming a special counsel to pursue the Biden case even further. These are deeply troubling allegations from a highly credible person. It deserves a lot more scrutiny, and I intend to give it that.
All right, Vince, we're going to leave it right there. Thank you so much, as always. Great to get your insights.
Thank you.
In other news tonight, the Vatican has completed a formal investigation called an apostolic visitation of Bishop Joseph Strickland of the Diocese of Tyler, Texas. The investigation was conducted by the Dicastery of Bishops. It points to possible disciplinary action against Bishop Strickland. The 64-year-old has faced criticism for what some see as inappropriate social media posts critical of Pope Francis and Vatican documents. Popular, though, among some U.S. conservatives for his defense of the unborn and the definition of marriage. For more coverage, visit CatholicNewsAgency.com. The Vatican has named Bishop Christopher Coyne as coadjutor bishop for the Archdiocese of Hartford. The move means he will assist Archbishop Leonard Blair until the Archbishop reaches retirement age next year. Bishop Coyne has led the Diocese of Burlington, Vermont since 2015. We have a lot more still to come here on EWTN News Nightly, including 3 powerful words. Pope Francis offers encouragement for the faithful using a phrase from our Lord, and guiding the faithful. Father Mike Schmitz reveals the secrets to his popular podcasts. An estimated 2 million people are expected to take part in a sacred pilgrimage for Muslims beginning today. The pilgrims will make their way from Mecca in Saudi Arabia to a tent in a nearby desert. There, they will spend a day and night in prayer. This is the first time in 3 years that the event is being held at full capacity following the coronavirus pandemic. It is one of the largest religious gatherings in the world. The president of Brazil is offering to help secure the release of a Catholic bishop in prison in Nicaragua. President Lula made the remarks soon after his visit in Rome with Pope Francis. Bishop Alvarez was jailed earlier this year by the Ortega regime for allegedly helping anti-government protesters. Pope Francis reminds the faithful of the power of the words, "Be not afraid."
Che dovranno subire per il Vangelo, una realtà ancora attuale.
During his Sunday address, the Holy Father said that there is a cost to remaining faithful to the truth, but added that even those who threaten death for following Christ can never harm our soul. Pope Francis also said the only thing to fear is a life wasted pursuing trivial manners. After his Sunday address, the Holy Father prayed for the family of a young woman who disappeared from the Vatican 40 years ago.
Una terribile violenza tra bande rivali ha seminato morte.
Emanuela Orlandi was a 15-year-old daughter of a Vatican employee. She was last seen in late June 1983. Her mysterious abduction remains a topic of intense conversation and speculation in Italy. Joining us now from Rome is Andreas Tannhauser, EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief. Andreas, great to be with you today. First off, remind us, if you will, more about this case and the young girl's ties to the Vatican.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy. We have not reported too much about this case lately just because everything has been said already in the last 40 years. It's a tragic case of a teenager who went missing after a music lesson in the city center of Rome. Her father worked for the pontifical household of Pope St. John Paul II and was a citizen of the Vatican state. Now, there are not many lay people who are Vatican citizens and even fewer female teenagers who go missing. This fueled speculations and sparked headlines for decades now. Last year, Netflix came out with a series on the so-called Vatican Girl, which got a lot of viewers, especially here in Italy. Many people who might have had some involvement with the family or the teenager directly were interviewed. They speculated and offered various theories about what happened and whether Emanuela Orlandi is really dead or not. And today, newspapers and other news outlets are filled with headlines again about this case, not least because Pope Francis mentioned it so prominently.
And Andreas, as we mentioned, I mean, she disappeared almost exactly 40 years ago. That said, has there been any progress made in this case?
Yeah, well, the problem with this case is that after 40 years, there's still not a lot to report on it. A 15-year-old Vatican citizen attended a music lesson never to return again. There have been several investigations into this. The latest one was opened back in January of this year, where the Vatican chief prosecutor collected all available material and started the proceedings again to understand if it was appropriate to even speak of a crime or not. And Pope Francis had seen to it that the prosecutor would have maximum freedom to do so. And this month, the chief prosecutor confirmed, and I quote, "Some leads are worthy of further investigation." These leads were also shared with the prosecutor's office in Rome, so also the city of Rome could decide whether to open up an independent investigation. While the Netflix series and other media commentaries speculate that the Vatican might have been involved somehow in Emanuela's disappearance, there's been a lot undertaken on the side of the Church to bring clarity to this mystery. In 2019, for example, 2 tombs in the German cemetery inside the Vatican walls were opened because of a tip from the Orlandi family. Yet, nothing was found. And despite many investigations that had found nothing, the Vatican seems to remain open to pursue any lead that could resolve this mysterious and tragic case.
And Andreas, quickly, before I let you go, did the Holy Father shed any new light on this case during his remarks yesterday?
Well, during his remarks yesterday, he primarily expressed his closeness to the family and shared his condolences with Emanuela's next of kin, especially to her mother. He also assured them of his prayers, and he took the opportunity to express his closeness to all the families around the world who have suffered the disappearance of a loved one. It's not an easy case, Tracy, and we might never find out what really happened to Emanuela. Sadly, it also shows how quickly people are prepared to assume that the Church has something to do with any crime or incident.
Well, Andreas, thank you so much for your time in that report today. We appreciate it. Andreas Tannhauser, EWTN Vatican Bureau Chief. Thank you again. Up next on EWTN News Nightly, sharing the good news. Father Mike Schmitz reveals some of the secrets behind his popular podcasts. Well, this Sunday marks the halfway point of the calendar year, and if you're following along with a popular podcast, it also means you're nearly halfway through with a Catholic Catechism. Catechism in a Year with Father Mike Schmitz averages 200,000 daily downloads and YouTube viewers. This is the follow-up to Father Schmitz's widely popular Bible in a Year podcast. It finished with 550 million total downloads. We recently caught up with Father Mike Schmitz to find out more about the podcasts and some unlikely competition that he's receiving. And we go now to Father Mike Schmitz, host of the Catechism in a Year and Bible in a Year podcast. He is also a priest in the Diocese of Duluth, Minnesota. Father Mike, welcome back. So good to see you.
Thank you, same.
And we have a lot to get to today, but first I want to start off by talking about the Catechism in a Year podcast. What have been some of the highlights for you?
That's a great question. One thing that was is one highlight has been the surprise I have that people are sticking with it. I thought this would be. I thought about this about the Bible as well. Is that people would like, okay, first 3 weeks of January, and then they'd be like, okay, that was a great idea, good intention, good resolution for the new year, and then peter out. I thought the Catechism would be even tougher. I think I've talked to so many people who have said that they have. The Catechism, I think, is a harder start, but many people have said that it's an even better, they've gotten a lot out of it. I mean, a lot of things when it comes to the Bible is super good, I think, and I can't say enough about how grateful I am for doing the Bible in a year. But the big surprise has been the number of people who have not only stuck with the Catechism, but have said that it's just been a huge blessing in their life to understand the faith in a deeper way. Yeah, that's wonderful. I understand you're also branching out into video. Tell us about that. So one of the things that Ascension has done is they have taken the audio for the Bible in a Year and the Catechism in a Year. And so every day when an episode drops on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts or whatever, they also have a YouTube channel. So people can actually read along to the transcript as it's going. So whether it's the Bible, they can see the words on the screen, or the Catechism or the commentary, it's all right there. So it's one of those really cool things where it not only has the ability you can listen to it if you want, but you also can listen and read even if you didn't have a Bible in front of you or the Catechism in front of you. So the YouTube channel is just really cool. Yeah, that's really great. I mean, that's helpful for a lot of people indeed. I want to bring this up because it's so cute. A while back, we did an interview with a 9-year-old boy in Michigan who has his own podcast, and I know you know where I'm going with this. And he says that he was inspired by your work, which is just amazing. Praise be to God. When you heard about this little boy, what did you think? I mean, what was your reaction? I just kind of laughed. I thought it was really funny. I thought, but not just funny. Also edifying and all the good things too. But I just thought that's really cool. And then I read deeper about I think how he's doing one episode a week, which I think just is really incredible to tell those Bible stories. And just is discerning at 9 years old of what God wants in his life and what wants him to do. But he right now doing producing content of just telling stories of the Bible is awesome. I think sometimes we get so caught up in what will God want me to do in 20 years from now, like someone if they're 9, as opposed to thinking what could I do right now? And for him to have that initiative, I thought he's a homeschooler because all the greatest, most creative, imaginative, and then initiative people I've met have almost always been homeschool kids. So maybe he is. I'm not sure if he is or not. But I thought, what a gift he is to be able to just take this idea and then run with it with his family. Yeah, it really is a great idea and inspiring to others too. And you inspired him, so that's wonderful. Why do you think, podcasts, in particular your podcast, has become so popular and just a great way for people to learn the faith? What have you been hearing from people about that? Yeah, well, one thing I think is there has been a desire. So the Bible and the Catechism, I think, are two different kind of animals in the sense that when it came to the Bible, there are so many people who have said, I've always wanted to read the Bible. I've always wanted to know what's inside this book. I've always wanted to know my faith. I've always wanted to know the story. I've always wanted to know. And so the Bible in a Year podcast made it really just easy. You just press play. And not only that, I mean, I think there's 3 elements to that. One is you just press play. It's easy. The second thing is they were like, how do I go through this? I don't know how to proceed. And since we use Jeff Caven's Great Adventure Bible Timeline as kind of the template for the guidance through this, it's like, okay, so this is the map. And then the third part being the commentary afterwards. So it usually in the Bible in a Year, what I'll do is read the scripture and then give some kind of commentary. And that's some guidance. I don't know how many times I've talked to people who said, yeah, I went through the whole, I listened on that day, whatever day it was, because there was like, I pressed play. I had no idea what that meant when it came to the Bible. Like maybe it was just a bunch of names, or maybe it was just some things that were happening that I have no idea how to make a sense of this. And then the commentary being really helpful and saying, oh, this was the context for that. So I think those three elements really, really made it accessible to people who already wanted to do this.
In part 2 of the interview, tomorrow, Father Schmitz takes a closer look at why it's so important for the faithful to know the Catholic Catechism and also some of the feedback that he has received from his listeners. Again, that's tomorrow here on EWTN News Nightly. And we thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Tracy Sabol. Good night and God bless.